Hey guys. Tonight we're slipping into the satin-lined nightmare of the Elizabethan court where lace is crusty, breath is weaponized, and cleanliness is mostly theoretical. The candles are lit. The court is whispering. And you, lucky soul, are freshly arrived in the presence of Gloriana herself, Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, ruler of England, mistress of strategy, icon of fashion, and, well, let's just say, not a regular at the soap shop. The air is thick with rose oil and quiet desperation. A lady-in-waiting just fainted. Could be the corset. Could be the smell. You'll never know. Welcome to 16th Century Hygiene. A world of powdered wigs, crusty ruffs, and the very real possibility of stepping on a rat skull on your way to fetch the Queen's toothpick. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. So drop that in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in the royal court with high hopes and a less than fortified stomach. The palace is visually stunning, intricate carvings, rich tapestries, stained glass windows glowing in the daylight, but the smell hits you like a cartload of rotting turnips. It's floral on the surface, but underneath lurks a stew of human sweat, stale beer, chamber pot ghosts, and the unfortunate side effect of nobody understanding germs, or soap. You try not to breathe too deeply. Good luck with that. You're ushered through a series of antechambers, your boots sinking slightly into rushes on the floor. They're meant to freshen the place, sprinkled with lavender, rose petals, and bits of dried herbs, but they also soak up everything: spilled wine, rat droppings, spittle, and the occasional vomit. And then they're left there for weeks or months. Historians still argue whether these rushes were actually changed regularly, or whether that's just something people hope was done. You try not to look too closely at the floor. The air is hot and sticky, trapped in thick stone walls and heavy velvet curtains. You spot a courtier fanning himself with a bejeweled feather while dripping visibly into his ruff. No one bats an eye. This is normal. Finally, you arrive in the privy chamber, Elizabeth's private domain. The Queen is being powdered. Not delicately, not artistically, more like plastered. Her skin is being painted ghost white with a mixture called Venetian ceruse, made from vinegar and white lead. That's right, lead. On her face, every single day. You watch the lady-in-waiting dab the paste across Elizabeth's cheeks with something that looks like a rabbit's foot. The Queen doesn't flinch. She's used to it. Long live the glow. Someone murmurs. You notice something else. The Queen's eyebrows are nearly invisible. And so's her hairline. That's on purpose. High foreheads were in vogue, so women plucked or shaved their brows and hairlines into oblivion. Elizabeth has leaned all the way in. Her forehead could host a banquet. The scent of the Queen is powerful. Layers of rose water, civet, and musk. Perfume is essential here. Not just a luxury, but a defense mechanism. It's sprayed on clothes, hair, gloves, even on the pages of books. The theory is, if it smells strong, it must be clean. You doubt anyone here would survive 10 minutes in a modern dentist's office without bursting into tears. You stand at attention as Elizabeth inspects a new delivery of gloves. Not one pair, but 30, all perfumed. She presses them to her nose, one by one, and you swear she grimaces at the one scented with rosemary. It's immediately discarded, possibly exiled. She prefers rose and orange blossom. Noted. Now comes the ceremonial sniffing of the courtiers. It's subtle, but real. As people approach the queen, she leans slightly, imperceptibly, to gauge their freshness. This isn't about being cruel. It's survival. She's famously fastidious and deeply paranoid of sickness. And yet, paradoxically, she won't let doctors touch her. This is a woman who rules with an iron fist in a velvet glove, provided that glove doesn't smell like week-old mutton. A page enters with a tray of lemon water. Not to drink. To rinse. A few courtiers dab their mouths with cloths. Then rinse and spit discreetly into silver bowls. It's the closest thing to oral hygiene you'll see today. Elizabeth doesn't participate. Her black teeth are a badge of status. Sugar was expensive, and she adored it. Her smile rotten, but fashionable. Better a decayed jewel than a clean stone. One sycophant says, trying to flatter her, he will probably be knighted. In a quiet corner, you spot the queen's collection of grooming tools: gold ear scoops, ivory toothpicks, silver tweezers, a miniature mirror, several combs that haven't seen soap since Mary Tudor was alive. You examine a comb more closely. There's something lodged in the teeth. You choose not to identify it. You help dress the queen for a small audience. The process takes hours. Layers upon layers of stiffened fabric, lace, ribbon, and jewels are assembled like armor. You wonder how she moves under all that. She doesn't. Much. Walking is reserved for very short, dramatic bursts. The rest is posing. Powerful. Gliding posing. As the final piece, a collar that could double as a wagon wheel is fastened around her neck. Elizabeth glances toward you, her face unreadable, her eyes sharp. Smell is memory. She says softly, perfume is power. Never forget that. And you won't. Not with this noseful of Tudor air. You've made it to day 2 without passing out or throwing up, which already puts you ahead of several new courtiers. Well done. Your reward: helping Her Majesty not bathe. Yes. You read that correctly. Elizabeth I is many things: brilliant, terrifying, political genius, fashion icon, and let's say it together, absolutely committed to not bathing more than she has to. I bathe once a month, whether I need it or not, she reportedly said. And you suspect even that was aspirational. You are now part of the team responsible for maintaining the illusion of freshness without ever introducing the horrors of actual water. You start by fetching the linen, not the kind you sleep on, the kind you scrub your body with instead of bathing. Fine linen cloths are warmed by the fire and lightly spritzed with rosewater or vinegar, then rubbed over the skin to remove whatever's accumulated. It's called dry bathing, and it's basically glorified dusting. You watch a maid gently wipe behind the queen's ears with one while trying not to gag from the bouquet of sweat, powder, and something suspiciously cheese-like. The queen sits calmly through it all, regal, still, probably trying not to inhale. This is the morning routine, and it's as far as personal cleansing is going to go, unless something truly catastrophic happens. like a pigeon flying into her hairpiece or a noble vomiting on her slippers. The thing is, she's not unique. Bathing, in Elizabeth's time, is considered risky business. Doctors warn that hot water opens the pores, allowing disease to slip in and attack your innards. It's safer, they say, to avoid full immersion and stick with scented cloths, dried herbs, and the occasional sprinkle of vinegar behind the knees. Historians still argue whether this fear was universally believed or simply a courtly excuse to save water and effort. You lean toward deeply committed group delusion. Today, you're assigned to oversee the warming of the Queen's chamber pot. It's winter, and the royal backside doesn't sit on cold ceramic. Thank you very much. A footman carries the empty pot with reverence, while another heats a small tile in the fire. The result is still a pot full of human consequence, but a warm one. Progress. The Queen uses the pot behind a screen, attended by one or two trusted ladies. You do not make the cut. You do, however, carry it out afterward, holding it at arm's length, like it contains cursed relics. No one talks about this part of court life, but it's constant. There are no bathrooms, just chamber pots and a complex etiquette about who empties them and how much they're allowed to grimace while doing it. You ask where the waste goes. Someone points vaguely toward a trench outside the kitchens. You choose not to investigate. The less you know, the better. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth receives a visiting noble. You help lay the rushes on the floor before he enters, not new rushes, but repositioned ones, so the cleanest bits face outward. It's smoke and mirrors. You spray them with orange blossom water. The noble arrives, bows low, and gifts the Queen with a tiny glass vial of perfume. She accepts it with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. That vial will join the dozens already on her table. Lavender, clove, rose, jasmine, ambergris, musk, and no joke civet, which is, yes, made from the scent glands of a wildcat. Someone tells you it smells stronger the longer it ages. You hold back tears as the Queen speaks with her guest. You notice how carefully she controls her breathing. Shallow, regal. She's perfected the art of not smelling her own court. You try it. You fail. By evening, the scent in her chambers has shifted. The heat from the fire has reawakened every stale odor buried in fabric. Wig powder and human folds. You watch the Queen recline in her robes, her white makeup cracking slightly at the jawline. Her wig looking a little more deflated than this morning. She doesn't bathe, but she does change. Night clothes are brought freshly aired, not washed, and she's gently dusted again with herbs. A bit of crushed violet under the arms, a flick of cinnamon near the hairline. The illusion of freshness is carefully restored. You're told not to mention the silver basin filled with cloudy water sitting in the corner. It's for foot washing. Just the feet. Sometimes, you glance at the other servants. One has powdered her own armpits. Another is chewing dried parsley like a medieval breath mint. A third discreetly uses a rag to clean their ears. You join them. It's not bathing, but it's the best you're going to get. As you drift toward your own straw pallet tucked behind a tapestry, the scent of lavender battles with the scent of day-old goat meat, you feel both defeated and weirdly proud. You haven't washed, but you've survived the royal no-bath day. And honestly, that feels like an accomplishment. Tomorrow, Maybe you'll get to see the infamous lead face mask up close. Or maybe you'll get to carry another warm chamber pot. One can dream. Your hands still smell faintly of lavender and warm regret. You're not sure if the scent will ever come off. It's dawn again at court, and the queen is already in her throne room, pretending not to shed. Today, you've been promoted from chamber pot duty to the even more glamorous task of helping prepare Her Majesty's morning face. Let's be clear, Elizabeth's face is not just a face. It's a political weapon. It must be seen to be ageless, ethereal, unbothered by time, war, or the smell of 1,000 unwashed courtiers. And the way she achieves this illusion, with poison and prayer. You're handed a small alabaster jar of Venetian ceruse. It looks like whipped cream. It smells like vinegar and despair. It's made of white lead, soaked in vinegar, and mixed into a paste that slowly eats through your skin while promising to make you look like a Renaissance angel. Elizabeth slathers this on daily. You are instructed to apply it gently with a padded sponge, avoiding her eyes, lips, and any visible open sores. There are several. The queen sits still, regal as a marble bust. While you work, the paste settles into her fine lines, which you immediately try to re-smear into oblivion. Her skin is papery, rumored to be scarred from smallpox. But no one says this aloud. You glance at her throat. The skin there is mottled and flaky. She wears high collars for a reason. When the ceruse is set, you dust her with powdered starch. This gives her a matte finish, the Elizabethan equivalent of Instagram's Paris filter. Then comes the rouge, a reddish paste made from cochineal insects crushed into wax or sometimes even cinnabar. Another delightful mercury-based option. You dab it onto her cheeks and lips, trying not to notice the tremble in her lower eyelid. Maybe she's tired. Maybe the mercury is working its magic. You step back. Her face is radiant, deathly radiant. The look she goes for is less healthy glow and more undead noblewoman who haunts your tapestries. Next come the details. Eyebrows are darkened with soot, sometimes from candle stubs. Mascara is a mix of coal dust and egg whites. Her lips are painted with a small brush made from squirrel fur. You are warned not to smear. Smearing is a punishable offense. You don't dare ask how long this process takes. But you're fairly certain the sun was higher when you started. A lady in waiting brings a tiny hand mirror made of polished metal. Elizabeth examines herself, tilts her head slightly, and smiles. One black tooth gleams. "Excellent," she murmurs. "Now fetch the wig." Ah, yes. The crown jewel of horror, her hairpiece. Today's choice is an auburn number styled in intricate rolls and studded with pearls. It is not lightweight, nor is it fresh. You lift it carefully and nearly faint from the aroma. Underneath the curls lurks a community of dried rose petals, powdered starch, and possibly last week's lunch. Historians still argue whether these wigs were powdered daily or only when someone fainted from the fumes. You place the wig gently atop her head. She adjusts it with practiced precision, using a long silver pin to anchor it in place. Her real hair is braided tightly underneath, hidden away, graying and sparse. No one is allowed to see it. Image is everything. As you fasten the last pearl clip, you notice a small bald patch on the back of her scalp. The skin there is pink and tender. It looks raw. You look away. The rest of the day, the queen is all pageantry. Herr Holz. But behind the scenes, that makeup begins to crack. Literally. It dries, flakes, and clumps in the corners of her mouth. She doesn't eat in public anymore, partly because it's unseemly for a monarch, and partly because her lipstick contains enough lead to solder a window pane. You wonder if her headaches are caused by the weight of the crown or the slow internal poisoning. You overhear a physician whisper about tremors in her hands. Another wonders if the Queen's occasional mood swings, ranging from euphoric flattery to volcanic fury, in the span of a sentence, might be symptoms of mercury poisoning. But no one says anything officially. She is Gloriana, immortal, perfect, the Queen whose very face is the emblem of a golden age. Later, you help clean her brushes. The rouge pot is crusted around the edges. The white lead sponge is hard as rock. You rinse them gently in rose water, and try not to think about the layers of skin and sickness embedded in every tool. That night, as Elizabeth removes her mask of beauty and silence, you watch the transformation with reverence and unease. Her skin underneath is pale, marked with tiny lesions. The cracks are deeper now. Her eyes water. She dabs at them with a cloth. She insists, smells like violets. You detect iron and fatigue. Still, when she stands up, towering in her ruffled collar and pearl-studded bodice, the illusion reasserts itself. She is radiant again, powerful, terrifying, and slowly dying from her own reflection. You drift off that night, curled on a velvet cushion, the scent of stale powder in your nostrils. Your dreams filled with ghostly white faces that never blink. You wake up gagging on sweetness. Not metaphorical sweetness, actual. Sticky, cloying, unbearable sweetness, wafting from the Queen's breakfast tray. She's requested candied violets, preserved plums, and a honey cake tart for her morning appetite. Welcome to day 4, where sugar is both the status symbol and the silent assassin of the Elizabethan elite. Today, you're shadowing the Queen's personal food steward. Your job assist with serving and, crucially, managing the aftermath mainly, what the sugar does to her teeth. You thought you understood dental hygiene. You thought toothbrushes existed. In Elizabeth's court, oral care means rinsing with wine, poking at your molars with a goose quill, and hoping for divine intervention. And yet, sugar is devoured like it's sent from heaven. Elizabeth adores its sugar-dusted marzipan sculptures, golden syrup-drenched fruits, sugar paste molded into crowns, castles, and once, disturbingly, a replica of her own face. She ate that too. You lean over to serve her candied orange peel, and her breath hits you like hot mead gone wrong. It's not just her. Everyone here shares the same halitosis: bouquet, sugar, rot, dried beef, and a hint of clove. Historians still argue whether tooth powder was widely used by the nobility or just recommended in books no one read. You see no evidence of mint or anything remotely abrasive. Later, as she reclines and speaks with visiting nobles, she smiles generously, proudly revealing blackened, decaying teeth, one visibly wobbling. No one flinches. No one mentions it. In fact, you overhear a courtier whisper. She has the finest teeth in England. It's meant as a compliment. Apparently, rotten teeth mean you're wealthy enough to afford sweet things. There's no winning. Your next task is to prepare Her Majesty's tooth cleaning kit, and the term is used loosely. First, you soak a small linen cloth in red wine, preferably claret. for the antiseptic effect. Then, you mix together honey, salt, powdered sage, and sometimes even crushed eggshells to create a paste. This concoction is rubbed gently over the teeth. Gently, because her gums bleed at the slightest provocation. You assist one of the ladies in waiting in the ritual. The queen opens her mouth, and you pretend not to notice the greenish tinge on one of her molars. She swishes the wine for 10 seconds before spitting into a silver bowl. The bowl is covered with a lace cloth, a symbolic gesture. You empty it with reverence and try not to gag. There's a golden toothpick in her kit. 2. It's shaped like a tiny dagger and engraved with floral scrollwork. You're warned not to touch it without gloves. It's considered both functional and sacred. Once, a diplomat asked to borrow it. He was exiled. You now understand why. After the cleaning comes the perfume this time. For the mouth, the queen dabs her tongue with a drop of rose oil. It helps. A bit. She then chews cloves, not for digestion, but to mask the scent of slow oral ruin. You wonder how many monarchs could chew on a burning flower bud and call it refinement. You wander into the kitchens later, searching for more of the queen's beloved sugar cakes, and find the cooks red-faced and panicked. Someone's dropped a tray of molded sugar swans. One has shattered. You're instructed to help reconstruct it using warm honey as glue. You do your best, but it ends up looking more like a sugar pelican. You pray she won't notice. Back in the privy chamber, the queen is speaking to a visiting poet. You notice she's angled her face to present her better side, the one with fewer gaps. The poet compares her smile to the moon's gleam upon ivory. You briefly consider leaving court, changing your name, and pretending this day never happened. A court physician passes by and slips you a note. It's a recipe for tooth powder made from powdered coral and burnt rosemary for emergency use. It reads, you pocket it, unsure if it's a joke or a mercy. The queen naps in the afternoon, her mouth slightly open. You sit silently near the window, the air thick with violet water and clove. You stare at her face so powdered, so constructed, so commanding, and you can't help but think of the skull beneath it all, the one that still smiles no matter how many teeth fall out. Evening comes, and a ball is held. Elizabeth does not eat in public, but she allows guests to feast on a magnificent sugar banquet, towers of crystallized fruit, sculpted scenes of mythological drama, all crafted from boiled sugar and dyed with beetle shells. You watch as noblemen devour the Venus of candied almond paste without irony. By the end of the night, several guests are rubbing their gums. One's nose is bleeding. No one connects it to the dessert. You retreat to your chamber, rubbing your own molars with your sleeve and whispering apologies to your future dentist. You wake with your jaw clenched, as though your subconscious has been grinding through the queen's molars all night. But no rest for the powdered today. You're assigned to an even more intimate detail, tending to the royal wardrobe, where laundry meets mystery and nothing is ever fully dry. Let's start with the obvious. Elizabeth doesn't sweat like the rest of us. Or rather, she absolutely does. But she will not be seen to do so. She has upwards of 3,000 gowns in her collection, each made of layered brocade, velvet, lace, and precious gems, and washing any of them is basically forbidden. Water is the enemy. Laundry is not about cleaning. It's about airing. You begin your day in the great wardrobe, a room filled with trunks, racks, and servants, all desperately trying to make the queen's garments look fresh without ever introducing moisture. You learn the art of brushing long strokes with soft cloth to lift dust. Skin flakes and food crumbs from sleeves embroidered with silver thread. For odor, crushed herbs in little sachets tucked into bodices, along with powdered orris, root smells like violets. Behaves like talcum. Today's featured gown is a stiff pink satin with pearls stitched into the sleeves. You're told to lay it carefully across a screen so the creases can rest. Not flatten. Rest. That's the extent of the royal laundry process. Occasionally, a particularly pungent garment is hung near a fire. Like meat being smoked, undergarments are a different story. The queen's smocks linen shifts worn beneath her gowns do get washed, but sparingly. It's considered scandalous to wear nothing underneath. So, smocks must be kept on rotation. You're handed one to inspect. It's yellowing beneath the arms. Despite a generous dusting of starch and lavender, you hold it with 2 fingers. A laundress tells you to stop being precious and throws it into a basin of boiling urine. Yes, urine, collected from chamber pots and left to ferment. It's nature's bleach. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's garments were cleaned with ammonia from urine or merely sun-dried and perfumed. You now know the truth, and you kind of wish you didn't. The boiling is followed by a scrubbing with lye soap made from ash and animal fat. Your hands sting from helping. They tell you to rub vinegar on the raw bits. You consider jumping into a moat instead. Later, you return to the queen's chambers with a stack of freshly cleaned linen, still faintly steaming. The queen is preparing for an audience and is changing into a deep green velvet gown with gold threading. As she lifts her arms, you catch a glimpse of her chemise slightly stained, stiff from starch, but freshly scented with rose and rosemary. Progress. The gown takes nearly an hour to position. There are no zippers, no elastic, just pins, laces, and an army of women yanking, smoothing, and refastening. You're handed a bone hook to tighten her stays. With each pull, Elizabeth's waist is sculpted into a shape nature never intended. She doesn't flinch. This is the price of majesty and breathlessness. As the final pin is secured and the queen turns toward the mirror, you spot a faint smudge of soot on her collar. A handmade gasps. Everyone freezes. You dive in with a sachet of orris root and gently dab the spot. It lightens. Not perfect, but better. You survive. After the audience, the queen changes again, this time into a riding habit blue damask with stiffened shoulders and a hat like a weapon. You notice her shoes velvet-lined and embroidered with tiny Tudor roses. They're pristine. She rarely walks. Instead, she glides, or is carried. Her feet are pale, narrow, and clean. Probably the cleanest part of her, but that's not to say shoes are sanitary. You visit the wardrobe storage later and are introduced to the slipper pile shoes waiting to be refurbished. There's no real washing, just brushing, airing, and resoling. Some smell like musty roses. Some smell like defeat. Before bed, the queen dons her nightgown, another smock. This one, lighter. Still heavily scented, her wigs are removed and aired by the hearth. Their interiors dusted with lavender. One has a suspicious clump in it. No one investigates. A maid whispers about a louse infestation last winter. You make a mental note to sleep in gloves. You help unlace the queen's corset, revealing deep red marks along her rib cage. She breathes deeply for the first time in hours. You hand her a cloth soaked in elderflower water. She presses it to her face, wiping away a full day's worth of lead, sweat, and deception. The cloth turns beige-gray. Her skin beneath is papery, brittle, still. When she looks up at you, unpainted and undone, she doesn't look weak. She looks powerful, raw, alive, in a way her painted version never quite manages. She gestures for her wig stand. You bring it, and she sets the hairpiece down carefully. No man sees me like this. She murmurs, not even my physicians. You nod. You already know. The illusion must never slip. She crawls beneath the cover's linen. Perfumed. Unchanged. The same sheets as last week. Maybe longer. You draw the curtains around her four-poster bed, and the chamber falls silent, except for the faint creak of her corset relaxing on the chair. Outside the window, the Thames carries the scent of damp wool, distant fish, and human sewage. Inside, you crawl to your corner mat and curl up, your fingers still reeking of rose, vinegar, and urine-bleached linen. You wonder what your pillow used to be. It smells like goose. Maybe. Or goat. Sleep comes slowly, with the scent of lavender pressed to your face like a lie. Morning comes with the grim squawk of peacocks in the royal gardens, and the slightly less majestic honking of someone vomiting behind the privy. You rise stiffly from your mat, brush goose feathers off your cheek, and brace yourself, because today you've been summoned to assist with something far worse than boiling laundry or rearranging a decomposing sugar swan. You're on wig duty. Specifically, you're assigned to the small chamber behind the Queen's dressing room, where a select group of unfortunate souls is responsible for the maintenance of Elizabeth's staggering wig collection. These aren't just wigs, they're marvels of engineering, constructed of horsehair, human hair, some of it rumored to be from executed ladies in waiting, sleep tight, and sometimes even silk thread. Each one weighs enough to qualify as neck trauma. You are presented with today's selection, a golden red coif, shaped like a heart, braided at the temples, and topped with tiny silver filigree stars. It smells like betrayal and lavender. Your job is to remove the dust and re-starch the base. You begin gently brushing the strands with a boar bristle tool, careful not to tug. Last week, someone pulled too hard and was demoted to privy pump duty. You like your fingers attached. While brushing, you discover a few secrets. First, these wigs are infested. Not crawling, not swarming, just subtly occupied. A single dead louse falls out as you comb. You try not to scream. The chambermaid beside you sighs and mutters something about powdered arsenic and prayer. She then shakes a tin of lice powder, a mixture of crushed herbs and powdered sulfur, over the scalp, netting like she's seasoning a pie. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly wore wigs daily or alternated between heavily styled hair and faux additions. But, given what you're holding, a woolly cloud that seems to breathe, you'd bet your breakfast she didn't put her real scalp through this madness every day. You're told to prepare the cushion head, a padded mannequin used for styling. You stab in dozens of pins to secure the wig's shape. Then begin lacing the curls with decorative wires so they stand upright like startled pastries. This particular wig will be worn during a procession later, and must remain flawless even through wind, heat, or unwanted proximity to French ambassadors. Someone brings in fresh starch-boiled flour paste with a dash of vinegar and begins painting it into the interior lining. You gag. It smells like feet, boiled parchment, and the kind of sadness you can't wash out. Once dry, this lining will stiffen the wig, giving it structure and resistance against sagging. But heaven forbid it rains. One storm, and the queen's hair collapses like a dying soufflé. You help arrange hairpins along a velvet roll for the queen's final touch-up. Each pin is engraved with miniature roses. One has a faint smear of blood on it. You choose not to ask. By midday, you're summoned into the dressing chamber to assist with the royal transformation. The queen has already been painted, corseted, and perfumed. Now comes the crowning act. She sits expressionless, eyes half-lidded, while her favorite wig is lowered onto her scalp like a holy relic. There's a grunt from the lady bearing its weight. The queen doesn't flinch. You tighten the final strap beneath her chin. It disappears beneath layers of pearl-threaded lace. You adjust the parting with a bone comb. As you do, she meets your eyes in the mirror. Just for a moment, not a strand out of place. She says softly. You nod. Terrified, she rises slowly. The full weight of crown and wig and public expectation now fastened to her skull. She is once again Gloriana Eternal, radiant, and extremely flammable. Because here's the kicker, they powdered these wigs with flammable substances. Starch, sulfur, crushed resinous herbs. If you stood too close to a torch, you could ignite like a Roman candle. There are stories. One noblewoman's hair caught fire during a mask. She survived, but her wig fused to her head. The queen never let her dance again. The procession begins. You stand in the wings as Elizabeth glides past. Her wig does not move. It does not shift, tremble, or reveal a single hint of human scalp. People gasp. Children stare. Nobles whisper about her ageless grace. Only you and the 4 ladies it took to mount that structure know the truth. Afterward, the queen returns to her chambers and demands her cooling cloth. It's soaked in elderflower water and kept beneath the windowsill. She presses it to her hairline, where the wig has pressed grooves into her skin. She sighs. You're dismissed for the evening, but not before you're told to hang the wig back on its stand, powder it once more, and leave a sachet of thyme in its crown to keep away the moths. You're not sure if that means insects or critics. As you stumble back to your pallet, your shoulders aching from carrying a wig stand down the gallery. If you hear one of the younger maids whispering to herself, her hair was once red, like fire. Now it's stitched into cages. You lie down, wondering what happens when the cages crack. You awake to the unmistakable scent of mildew and rosewater battling it out for dominance. The rain has finally arrived. Thin sheets tapping against the leaded windows, puddling in the courtyard, and soaking the hems of every nobleman who dared wear suede. You'd think this would be a cue for the palace to slow down. But no, the queen has called for her full regalia in a thunderstorm, and you, naturally, are drafted to assist with the royal underlayers. Today's mission: the farcical art of body shaping, or, as it should be called, Elizabethan architecture for the torso, before the outer gown, the jewels, or even the makeup. The queen must first be stacked, cinched, and padded into her silhouette. You're handed a set of items that resemble medieval torture instruments, but with embroidery. First, the farthingale, a hooped petticoat made of stiffened fabric and whalebone. It flares from the waist like a bell tower. You and another maid help lower it into position around the queen, who stands with arms outstretched like a reluctant saint being dressed for martyrdom. The structure creaks as it settles. When she turns slightly, it swings with the grace of a church door in a high wind. Next comes the busk, a rigid, flat piece of wood or bone that slides into a pocket at the front of her bodice. This isn't optional. It holds her posture, lifts her chest, and stops her from bending at the waist. Comfort, of course, is not the goal. You slide it in, trying not to catch her ribs. She winces slightly. You pretend not to notice. Then, the corset or pair of bodies, as they're called, it's made of stiff linen and reinforced with reeds, tightly laced up the back with colored ribbon. You and the senior maid take turns pulling the laces like a tug-of-war match, pausing occasionally to let her breathe before yanking again. Elizabeth never complains. She simply places one hand on the wall, the other over her abdomen, and bears it with royal resolve. You wonder how long she's been doing this. Since girlhood. Probably. Every day. Every court event. Every breath constrained for the sake of presentation. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's waist was genuinely narrow or simply sculpted by decades of armor-like dressing. You look at the mirror and see a torso shaped like an inverted wine goblet, narrow at the middle, heavy at the shoulders, padded at the hips. The male courtiers call it divine. You call it exhausting. Once she's strapped into her corset and busked like a ship's prow, you begin layering the petticoats. Not one, not two, 4, each of varying stiffness, meant to provide the outer gown with that perfect, majestic hang. One has been perfumed with cinnamon and myrrh. Another, embroidered with Tudor roses at the hem, just in case anyone dares peek underneath. Which they absolutely won't. The weight is staggering. You try, lifting the skirts, and nearly topple forward. How does she walk in this? How does she exist in this? Next comes the bodice. So stiff, it could stand on its own. You position it over her corseted torso and begin fastening the tiny hooks along the back. The fabric is cut low in front to expose her powdered décolletage, which has been dusted with crushed pearl to give it a glow of slow suffocation. The sleeves are next. Massive, detachable, and stuffed with padding to puff them out like overripe gourds. You button them on while balancing the queen's arm on your shoulder. She doesn't flinch. She's halfway into statue mode by now. Then the ruff. Oh, the ruff. A frilled neck piece of starched linen, so large it could be used as a satellite dish. You unfold it like a concertina and carefully tie it around her throat. She tilts her chin upward to allow for the final adjustment. Once secured, her neck disappears entirely. Only her head remains visible, floating above the lace like a judgmental moon. At last, the gown, a shimmering tapestry of gold thread, seed, pearls, and embroidered suns. You and 3 others lift it by the shoulders and maneuver it over the queen's towering silhouette. It settles like armor. You fasten it shut with tiny hidden clasps, tucking in stray bits of lace and whispering apologies to her ribs. When it's finally on, she stands motionless, breathing shallowly. You step back, dizzy from the effort. She looks transcendent, untouchable, an icon, a gilded fortress of starch and bone. Then she turns, slowly, like a ship changing course. You watch the entire structure pivot gown, farthingale, hoof, and all in perfect synchrony. She says nothing, just glides toward the gallery, where ministers and foreign dignitaries wait to kneel before her, like supplicants at a shrine. The rest of the day is a performance. The queen remains upright and unyielding, making witty remarks, sipping wine without bending her elbow, and managing not to tip over, despite the weight of 10 pounds of fashion strapped to her torso. Later that evening, back in her chambers, if you assist in undoing it all, the clasps come off first, then the sleeves, the gown, the petticoats. Each item is placed carefully on padded hangers or perfumed cushions. The corset leaves red welts along her sides. The farthingale squeaks as it's lifted away. When the final piece comes off, she exhales deeply, a long, slow breath she's probably been holding all day. Her ribcage expands like bellows. Her arms fall limp. You hand her a warmed cloth to press against the small of her back. You think, for a second, that she might say something, maybe about the absurdity of it all, maybe a joke. But she doesn't. She just closes her eyes. You finish hanging the last bodice and return to your mat on the floor. As you lie down, you wonder what it's like to go an entire day without bending at the waist. You twist experimentally. Your spine cracks. Luxury, you close your eyes to the faint rustling of silk, bone, and breathing. The rain hasn't let up. By morning, the palace smells like wet wool and rotting floorboards, disguised under an avalanche of crushed lavender. You roll off your mat with the subtle grace of a person whose back has become part of the rush matting. Outside your window, a servant tries to dry a tapestry with a goose wing, and sheer optimism. Inside, you're on lice patrol. Officially, it's called personal inspection and pest control. Unofficially, it's a deeply cursed task that makes you wish you were demoted to moat cleaning. One of the Queen's ladies has been itching, not daintily, aggressively, and, since Her Majesty must remain unblemished in every visible way, it's now a full-scale investigation. Guess who's holding the lice comb? You begin with the pillows. Goose down, stained with ancient sweat, and perfumed heavily with rosemary. You give one a test thump, and hello something tiny scuttles. You grit your teeth and fetch the lice-smothering solution, a thick oil made from vinegar, grease, and crushed bay leaves. You'll be coating the seams. The Queen's hairpieces aren't spared either. You dust powdered rosemary into each wig and beat them gently over a basin. A few curious insects drop like guilty confessions. You burn them in the hearth. Dramatically. You're not above theater. Then it's on to the Queen herself. Yes. You. Front row seat. She sits before her polished mirror, sipping weak wine, while two of you gently separate her real hair, what's left of it, and examine her scalp. It's patchy, brittle, and smells like lavender, soaked in time. She hasn't let anyone shave it clean. But the thinning is undeniable. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth wore wigs to hide illness, alopecia, or vanity's slow decay. Here, you see evidence of all three. You work quietly, dabbing oil near her temples, combing with the fine-toothed iron lice comb that's been heated slightly in the fire. She doesn't flinch. In fact, she hums softly, some long-forgotten tune. A lullaby, perhaps. You almost forget that you're holding a small parasite graveyard. You clean her linen cap neck stiff with sweat. held together by stitches and prayer. You boil it with rosemary sprigs and a crushed lemon rind. Then hang it over a smoky brazier. It comes out smelling vaguely edible. Don't be fooled. Later that day, word spreads through the palace. A rat has been found in the queen's privy. Dead. Of course. Possibly drowned. Possibly suicidal. The queen is unfazed. She simply orders more rose petals scattered near the commode and a fresh clove pomander hung from her neck. You wonder which is worse, the rat or the stench it's covering up. Privy maintenance becomes the next quiet crisis. You're told to assist. The royal commode, basically a velvet-lined box with a ceramic bowl, is rarely cleaned with enthusiasm. You approach it with equal parts reverence and fear. You empty it with tongs. Scrub the basin with ashes and vinegar. Replace the perfumed cloth draped over the seat. It's all very sacred and very smelly. As you work, you hear a nearby lady, in waiting, gossiping about a noblewoman who dared suggest indoor plumbing, some ancient Roman contraption. She's now mysteriously absent from court. You scrub harder. That night, the queen receives a physician. He enters with gloves, a leather pouch of herbs, and an expression that says, "I went to university for this." He checks her pulse, her tongue, and most awkwardly, her breath. You hold the silver bowl while she rinses with wine. Again, you're beginning to think red wine has replaced water entirely in this woman's internal ecosystem. He prescribes more lavender sackets, a cooling syrup of violet and honey, and a new pomander filled with clove, nutmeg, and dried orange peel. You're instructed to mix it. You sneeze violently for 15 minutes. That evening, a new gown is selected, a dusky blue velvet that's been scented with marjoram and angelica to mask the mildew. As you assist with dressing, the queen pauses. She scratches just once behind her ear. You exchange a glance with another maid. Nothing is said. The gesture is silently logged. Another powdering of rosemary for the pillows tomorrow. You help the queen into bed. The sheets haven't been changed in a week. You slip a fresh sachet of bay and thyme under her pillow and light a small beeswax candle. As she lays down, she murmurs, "They used to sing me to sleep. Now all I hear are whispers." You don't know whether she's talking about her youth, her enemies, or the lice. Once she's asleep, you retreat to your pallet. You check your scalp. You itch. Probably psychological. Probably, you reach for your own clove-stuffed cloth and tuck it near your head. It smells spicy and desperate. As the wind howls through the shutters and the fire crackles low, you wonder if lice have loyalty, or if they, like everyone else here, simply cling to the throne as long as it suits them. A loud knock at the chamber door jolts you from dreams of soft beds and normal hygiene. It's barely light outside, but your services are urgently required. One of the queen's teeth is acting up again, and everyone is in a panic because no one wants another royal outburst like the great toothache incident of 1585. You scramble to your feet, wash your hands in stale rosewater, and prepare to enter the terrifying realm of Tudor dentistry. You arrive to find Elizabeth pacing slowly in her chamber, one gloved hand pressed to her cheek. Her face is pale beneath its usual dusting of lead powder, and her mood is darker than her plum-colored robe. The offending tooth is hidden beneath all that carefully maintained decorum, but you can see it in the tightness of her jaw, in the slight wince when she speaks. No one breathes too loudly. The royal barber surgeon arrives not long after you do. He's a grim man with a twitchy eye and a leather satchel that smells faintly of blood, vinegar, and clove oil. You try not to stare at the brass tooth key tucked in his belt, the Elizabethan tool of doom that resembles something between a wrench and a medieval torture device. You're not sure whether to assist or flee. The Queen reclines on her daybed, head tilted slightly back. As the barber begins to examine the problem, he peers into her mouth with a small brass mirror and mutters something about advanced decay. No surprise. Elizabeth is known to favor candied violets, sugar-dipped almonds, and marchpane shaped like castles. All the lead in her face can't save her teeth from the sugar in her mouth. Historians still argue whether her famous reluctance to smile in later portraits was due to dental pain or political strategy. Honestly, it could be both. You're tasked with heating cloths soaked in sage water. The Queen presses one to her jaw as the surgeon prepares a poultice, some devil's brew of vinegar, mint, crushed garlic, and wine. She gags slightly when it's applied. But endures it. You try not to breathe through your nose. The tooth in question is black, not figuratively, literally. A rotten molar that has refused to die with dignity. The Queen refuses an extraction for now and demands that the swelling be brought down before the upcoming court mask. She cannot be seen wincing. Even if her jaw feels like it's been invaded by Satan's own blacksmith. You spend the day rotating compresses, crushing herbs, and dabbing her gums with a mixture of oil of cloves and opium. She takes the pain stoically, though at one point she does shout at a servant for breathing too heavily through his ears, which you decide not to unpack. Later, as she sits motionless by the hearth, chin slightly lifted like a portrait come to life, you see her touch her jaw with a kind of distant affection, as if even her pain has become part of the performance. Her public persona is armor. But that toothache, that's real. The next day, the Queen hosts foreign envoys. You observe from behind a tapestry, watching her smile carefully, only the top row of teeth exposed. Just enough to seem cordial, but not enough to reveal the battlefield within. Her words are smooth, her tone sharp, her posture flawless. No one suspects that under her pearl-encrusted bodice lies a pouch of mashed sage and wine-stewed myrrh, clutched in place with a silk ribbon and sheer willpower. In the evening, the Queen finally allows the barber to file the edge of the tooth. You hold the silver tray under her chin while he works. She doesn't scream. She barely breathes. But the sound metal grating on enamel is a song you won't soon forget. Somewhere between nails on slate and doom in audio form. When it's done, she rinses with wine and spits into the basin. You glimpse a dark streak. You pretend not to. She leans back, closes her eyes, and mutters, "God grant me peace from within, for there is none without." You nod solemnly, though you're mostly thinking about how many teeth you still have left and how much you now fear for them. After she retires for the night, you're sent to clean her personal items. The toothcloths go into a separate basin, one marked with a red thread, so no one uses it for anything else again. You scrub the silver mouth mirror and the tray, then hang them on a special hook labeled HYGIENE. You wonder who labeled it. Probably a sleep-deprived maid with dreams of escaping to a convent. As you return to your pallet, your head full of mint, vinegar, and regret, you realize the Queen never winced once in public. Not once. Her tooth may be a battlefield. Her breath, an herb garden in crisis, but her mask never cracked. You crawl under your thin blanket and run your tongue over your own teeth. Still whole. Still white. You vow to avoid sweets, to brush with crushed sage, to never let a barber with a brass crank come near you. As you drift off to sleep, you imagine the queen smiling, not the tight-lipped smirk of statecraft, but a real, full grin, and in that imagined smile, all the pain is gone. You awaken to frost coating the inside of the window panes. Your breath curls in little clouds as you exhale. And somewhere in the hallway, a page boy sneezes with the violent force of someone who's definitely not allowed to be ill. The Queen has declared today a day of visibility, an informal audience with the common people, a reminder that their glorious monarch still breathes and occasionally makes eye contact. Unfortunately, she's also woken up with a minor skin flare-up. Guess who's on powder duty? You arrive to her chamber to find her already seated, motionless, like a statue someone accidentally spilled paint on. Her face, normally powdered into moonlight perfection, is slightly blotchy, with faint redness around the jaw. You're told to correct it with the usual concoction, Venetian ceruse. It sounds fancy. It's horrifying. Venetian ceruse is basically white, lead mixed with vinegar. It creates that smooth, ghostly, alabaster finish Elizabeth is famous for. It also slowly poisons the wearer, pitting the skin, thinning the hair, and eventually eating away at the flesh beneath. But who cares about cellular decay when you're serving iconography? You begin by gently wiping yesterday's layer off her face. The cloth comes away, streaked with pale gray and hints of crimson. You hold back a cough and nod for the apothecary's assistant to hand you the fresh mixture. It's thick, goopy, and smells faintly metallic, like pennies dipped in desperation. You dab it carefully onto her cheeks, nose, and chin with a rabbit fur puff. Mind the temple, she says coolly. That side peels when I'm tired. Peels. You smile politely and pat more lead on it. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth was aware of the toxicity of her beloved ceruse. Some say she knew and used it anyway, valuing aesthetic over health. Others believe she trusted her court physicians, who probably learned medicine from the same guy who bled patients for sneezing. You suspect she knew. You suspect she knew everything. Once her face is set, you move to her neck and décolletage. This area must also be flawlessly pale, no hint of sunlight, freckles, or actual humanity allowed. You dust the powder in careful circles, blending it into the fabric of her bodice like a fading dream. The collar of her dress is embroidered with tiny silver hawks, each with pearl eyes. You're suddenly aware that they are watching you. You add a faint blush made from crushed cochineal beetles. Yes, beetles, dried, ground, and turned into pigment. You pat the rouge lightly onto her cheeks, giving the illusion of health. Somewhere, a beetle's ghost curses you. Next comes the lip color, a sticky red paste made from vermilion and wax. It's hard to apply because the queen never smiles while you're working. You gently draw the shape over her mouth, making it fuller, more regal, more detached from the aching tooth beneath. Her eyes are last. You line them with a kohl pencil, then brush her brows with a dab of soot and egg white. The effect is dramatic eyes that pierce without blinking. You finish with a light dusting of orris root powder, which smells vaguely of violets and powdered ambition. She examines herself in the mirror, tilts her head, nods once. It will do, she says. You're dismissed to clean the brushes. The rabbit puff is already shedding, so you'll have to stitch a new one by tomorrow. The soot-stained cloth goes into a special bin labeled combustible, because if this stuff ever touches fire, it could probably level Calais. After the audience, the queen returns, tired and flushed. She beckons you back to remove the paint. You work silently, gently swiping away layers of white and red, revealing the mottled, tired skin beneath. The sight of her without makeup is rare. Not because she hides, but because she chooses when to be seen. You feel oddly honored, or maybe just sad. She speaks softly. Do you think they see it? The cracks. You want to say no? That the people see a goddess. A legend. A ruler untouched by time. But your silence is more honest. She closes her eyes. You continue wiping her cheek with a cloth soaked in rosewater and almond oil. It smells pleasant. It won't help. You apply a soothing balm made from beeswax and chamomile. It helps ease the irritation, if not the damage. Tomorrow she'll wear another mask. And the day after. And the day after that. You place the used cloths in a small fireproof chest marked, "Do not touch." You clean the brushes, scrape the lead paste from the dish, and blow the rouge dust into the hearth, watching it sparkle briefly before dying. That evening, as you stretch out on your mat, you think about how every day she chooses to rebuild her face, not for vanity, but as armor. Powder, rouge, and vermilion, each one another shield against decay, gossip, mortality. Your skin itches, just thinking about it. You close your eyes and wonder what she dreams of. Not crowns, not court, maybe just waking up with her own skin unbroken. You wake to bells, not the elegant chime of mass or morning prayer, but the anxious clang of the royal laundresses having a breakdown. The queen's undergarments, apparently, have gone missing. Well, not missing exactly. They've been left too long in the lavender barrels and are now moldy. Elizabeth's linen smocks those delicate, hand-embroidered layers that shield her skin from the brutal textures of gowns and corsets now smell like wine gone bad. You're pulled into the cleanup team because, apparently, you've been labeled efficient under pressure, which is a nice way of saying you do disgusting tasks without complaining out loud. You're led to the wash chamber, where damp linens hang like ghosts over steaming vats. The stench is medieval. One unfortunate apprentice lad has already fainted and been gently rolled under a table until he recovers. You take a deep breath through your mouth and wade in. First, the linens are scrubbed with lye, soap, and ash, a concoction so abrasive you feel like your fingers are being scoured from the inside out. You handle one of the queen's personal shifts with exaggerated reverence. It's trimmed with lace and embroidered with tiny gold thread suns. And now, it has mildew freckles and smells like despair. After a full morning of boiling, scouring, and pleading with herbs to do their job, you carry the newly washed garments up to the queen's solar. The good news: the stains are gone. The bad news: so is half the embroidery. You lay the shift before the queen, with an apology ready on your lips. She barely glances down. Instead, she sighs and mutters. The Spanish ambassador sees better lace on his horses. You're dismissed. Her words sting. But you know she's not wrong. Elizabeth has an obsessive relationship with her clothing. Every ruffle, every seam, every stitched phoenix is part of a larger performance. She isn't just dressing. She's waging psychological warfare. She wears white when mourning, pearls when furious, and black velvet when she wants Parliament to beg for forgiveness. Historians still argue whether her vast wardrobe over 2,000 gowns, by some accounts, was born of vanity or strategic genius. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Later, you're sent to help the queen change for her afternoon stroll. This requires layers of petticoats, fur-lined slippers, and one of her famous black dresses, this one embroidered with silver thread in the shape of vines. As you lift the gown onto her shoulders, you catch a glimpse of something shocking her back, pale and dotted with red irritation. Likely from the soap. You pose. Horrified. "Don't pity me," she says flatly. You nod and fasten the gown. The queen's scent today is juniper, dried rosemary, and a faint ghost of mold the herbs couldn't quite chase away. She notices, orders a new sachet sewn before the evening meal. You start stitching immediately, using dried orange peel, cloves, and mint. You slip it into her bodice like a secret. The day ends with supper in the private gallery. You're called to serve wine. As she eats, you observe her meticulously. Avoid biting down on the left side. The tooth still sensitive. She conceals it perfectly. You hand her the goblet. She drinks and gives you a rare look. Not grateful. Exactly. But not dismissive either. After the meal, the queen retreats to her writing desk, and you're sent to clean her dressing room. The floor is littered with pins, loose threads, and a single withered rose petal. You collect each piece, sweeping them into your apron. You find one of her shifts hanging behind the fire screen, damp, stained again, with something dark, vine blood. You don't ask. You just take it downstairs. That night, your dreams are strange. You dream of her gowns walking without her in them, of silk shifting through the corridors, of a bodice whispering secrets into the ears of her enemies. You dream of black velvet weeping in the rain. When you wake, your hands still smell faintly of juniper and lye. You stretch your arms and feel the ache in your joints from lifting too many royal petticoats. You press your cheek to the rush matting, grateful for the scratch of something real. Somewhere in the palace, the queen is already being dressed again, her body slowly hidden beneath powder, lace, and pearls. And you're being summoned. They say layering is an art. They say it's about elegance, grace, courtly beauty. But you know better. Layering is how you survive a Tudor winter in a stone palace with no insulation, frozen chamber pots, and gowns so thick they could stop an arrow. You rise before the sun and rub your hands together for warmth. Your breath mists in the air. Somewhere in the courtyard, a dog howls, probably because it's stuck to the frost-covered flagstones. Today is a plague day, which means, ironically, more people indoors. The queen, determined to keep the court from falling into hysteria, insists on routine. Routine, in her case, involves layers. So many layers. You're summoned to her wardrobe, where a gown change is already in progress. 4 women are kneeling, tugging at laces. 2 are carrying trays of warmed bricks for her feet. You are handed a box of herbs and told, simply, scent the sleeves. You open the box. Inside, dried basil, mint, lavender, rosemary, thyme, a few crushed violets. You mix the herbs into fine muslin sachets and slip them into the padded sleeves of her dress. Not for charm, for protection. The prevailing belief is that disease travels through miasma, to foulère. So you dress the queen like a walking garden to ward off the invisible demons. You help slide the sleeves over her arms. The weight of the fabric shocks you anew every day. Her gowns aren't just pretty, they're weapons. Brocade, velvet, stiffened lace, whalebone bodices. One skirt alone could smother a dog. Her chemise is lined with rabbit fur. Over it comes an underskirt, then a padded farthingale hoop to give the outer skirt its regal width. Corset next. Laced until you hear a soft, hanging sound escape her lips. She doesn't complain. She never does. As she's dressed, a physician enters the chamber with an update. 2 more cases of plague in Southwark. The queen merely raises an eyebrow. Then they shall stay in Southwark, she says. She orders the windows closed. You wonder if that's better or worse. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's refusal to flee London during minor outbreaks was bravery or delusion. She claimed it was loyalty to her people. Others say it was a calculation to appear strong, to avoid seeming afraid. What's undeniable is that she stayed, even when others didn't. As noon approaches, the queen prepares for an outdoor procession just through the gardens, but still public. This requires gloves, a mask of fine lace soaked in vinegar, and a pomander the size of a goose egg. You're the one to thread the pomander chain through her bodice. It swings gently against her chest as she walks. Inside it cloves, nutmeg, frankincense, and enough ambergris to knock out a stable boy. You follow at a distance, keeping to the shadows. Courtiers gather, bowing, smiling through chattering teeth. Some try not to cough. One noblewoman sneezes and is immediately asked to leave. Her exit is quiet. You suspect you won't see her again. The garden is coated in frost. Statues wear little hats of snow. The queen glides like some mythical creature wrapped in fur and fortified herbs. She stops before a fountain and recites a line of Virgil. Someone claps. Someone else faint. It's probably unrelated. Still, a page discreetly drags the unconscious man into the shrubbery. That evening, the queen returns chilled and silent. You help her remove the outer layers. The gown is damp with sweat on the inside. Despite the cold, you peel away the corset, the farthingale, the under chemise. Her skin is mottled with red, where the fabric pressed too tight. You massage her arms with almond oil and marjoram to soothe the marks. She closes her eyes but doesn't sleep. A lady in waiting enters with bad news. A cousin of a cousin has perished from the plague. The queen's lip tightens. She orders more vinegar in the wash basins, more rosemary in the halls, and more heat for the bedchambers. No fire too large, she says. That night, you help stack bricks near her bed, each one baked and wrapped in cloth. They radiate a brief comfort, like hugs from forgotten angels. You tuck another sachet into her pillow, this one filled with rose petals and dried sage. She lies back, breathes in. The layers are gone now. She is just a woman in linen, shivering slightly beneath wool blankets. Her face is bare. You see the fatigue in her eyes. You return to your own pallet and wrap yourself in every spare cloth you can find. It's so cold, you hear the rushes crack under your weight. You pull your hood over your head and curl into a ball. Just before sleep claims you, you whisper, "Thanks for your own layers," even if they're just rags, and silently hope you don't cough tonight. Because, in this palace, coughing is dangerous. You wake up gasping for air. Not from a nightmare, but from the smell. The royal bed is being stripped. Again. And unfortunately for you, you're part of the team assigned to freshen it. Freshen being a relative term in Elizabethan England. You tie a scarf around your nose and follow the other servants toward the Queen's chambers. Already bracing yourself for what lies beneath the velvet and lace. The bed is a four-poster monument to royalty and mildew. Carved oak. Curtains thick enough to muffle screams. And feather mattresses that haven't been fully aired since the Pope had 2 working knees. As you pull back the first layer of brocade, a puff of warm, musky air hits your face, something between roasted meat and wet dog. You blink away the tears and keep peeling. First, the outer bedspread, an embroidered thing that weighs more than your cousin Timothy. Under that, a linen sheet, yellowed with age and spattered with what you tell yourself is spilled wine. Then the mattress cover. You lift it slowly, gently, like disturbing an ancient tomb. Beneath it, the tick mattress, full of goose feathers, damp at the edges from a week of trapped body heat and restless dreams. You find the usual debris: loose hairpins, a rose pétale, a faint imprint of some unfortunate insect. The air is rich with lavender and camphor and something else. You take a whiff. The Queen's famed sleeping vinegar, splashed generously to kill odors and, allegedly, evil spirits. Mostly, it just stings your eyes. You and the others lift the mattress with a grunt. It squelches faintly. You pretend not to notice. A footman nearby mutters a prayer under his breath. Probably smart. You begin the cleansing ritual, brushing the mattress with birch twigs dipped in rosewater and spirits, airing the linens near the hearth, and scrubbing the wooden frame with a paste made of sage, mint, and raw determination. You sprinkle powdered orris root between the layers for good measure. It doesn't so much clean as it politely distracts the nose. Meanwhile, a new sheet is prepared, woven from the softest Flemish linen and ironed with heated stones. You smooth it over the mattress and tuck the corners in with military precision. On top goes a fur-lined coverlet, because while the Queen hates sweating, she hates shivering even more. The pillows come next, stuffed with down and gently infused with violet oil. They're fluffed within an inch of their lives. You arrange them in a precise pyramid, just the way she likes one to cradle the head. 2 for the shoulders, and 1 mysterious smaller one. No one ever sees her use. The Queen enters silently during the process. You don't hear her until she speaks. Was something nesting in my sheets? You freeze. Then shake your head. Just old rosemary. Your Majesty. She raises an eyebrow. That rosemary had legs. You bow and say nothing. She nods toward the fire and settles into a nearby chair as you finish your work. You notice she's wearing a loose dressing gown embroidered with golden bees, symbol of order and hard work. Fitting. Her hair is unbound. Ararisight. Tumbling in thin auburn waves to her shoulders. She looks like a ghost of herself. Softer, but no less dangerous, as she sips warm clove wine. She tells you a story of a dream of riding a white stag through a forest that smelled of honeysuckle and rot. You're not sure if it's a warning or just small talk. With Elizabeth, they're often the same thing. You light beeswax candles near the bed, careful not to drip. She watches every movement. When you place the final herb sachet beneath her pillow, she says, "Add mint this time." The last one smelled like a wet bishop. You comply, Before she climbs into bed, she inspects the sheets herself, smooths her palm over the linen, sniffs the pillow, sits, and finally reclines with a satisfied sigh. "Good," she says, already half asleep. "Now burn the old one." You do. You carry the fouled linens to the kitchen hearth, where the laundresses are boiling starch in vats. One of them nods as you approach and tosses the bedding into the flames. It smokes and hisses like a dying animal. You try not to think about how many royal dreams soaked into that mattress. How many secrets, back in your quarters. You curl onto your own straw tick, still wearing the queen's smell like a second skin wine. Herbs, and the faintest trace of night sweat. You close your eyes and wonder if you'll ever sleep on clean sheets again. Probably not. You're summoned before breakfast, which can only mean one thing: cosmetics, disaster. The queen has a foreign envoy to impress, and a forehead that won't stop flaking. You stumble into the wardrobe room half awake, and are immediately handed a tray of remedies: sifted chalk, ground pearl, burnt alum, beeswax, and something suspiciously labeled fairy dust. You're pretty sure it's just starch and crushed camphor. But it sounds mystical enough for court. The queen sits motionless, already dressed in a gown of sapphire damask. She looks radiant from a distance. Up close, it's another matter entirely. Her skin is tight, with layers of ceruse, which have started to crack in the chill morning air. Tiny fissures run across her jaw like a dried riverbed. You resist the urge to poke them. She does not look amused. You begin gently dabbing at the flaking sections with a mix of mutton fat and rose oil. The goal is to soften the ceruse without removing it. It's like trying to moisturize a pastry without melting the icing. You mutter calming nonsense under your breath. Almost there, radiant as ever. While the oil seeps in, it works. Kind of. Next, she gestures to her eyes. You reach for her kohl-based eyeliner and begin redrawing the dramatic swoop that extends past her temples. One blink too early, and it smudges. You freeze. She doesn't flinch. You fix it. Mascara, in this era, is little more than soot mixed with grease. You brush it carefully over her lashes, which are thinning from years of lead exposure and probably stress. Still, with her gaze sharpened by kohl and shadow, she looks like someone who could command a storm to sit. For her cheeks, a new mixture today: carmine, made from dried cochineal beetles, ground with rose petals and a touch of mercury. This stuff stains everything it touches. You wear gloves. The queen does not. She lifts the pot herself and sniffs it. "More vivid," she says, and dabs some on her lips too. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's cosmetic use was driven by genuine insecurity or a theatrical devotion to image. Some say her worsening complexion after surviving smallpox made her retreat behind thicker and thicker masks. Others insist it was all for show. A power move in pigment form. Either way, you're elbow deep in the evidence. The final touch today is a forehead glaze. You mix egg white and powdered talc into a thin, shimmering film and gently brush it across her brow. It tightens as it dries, giving her a glassy, ethereal finish. She looks almost otherworldly, like a painting come to life, or something preserved rather than alive. You step back. She tilts her head to catch the light, smiles faintly, then sneezes. Disaster. The egg white glaze cracks. The ceruse shifts slightly on her jaw. One eye smears. You don't breathe. She dabs her nose with a monogrammed handkerchief and stares at you in silence. You spring into action. A fresh puff of chalk here. A redrawn lash line there. You blend. You layer. You whisper apologies to the gods of vanity. And, within minutes, her face is flawless again, more sculpture than skin. Let them wonder what I am, she says quietly, as long as they cannot look away, and they don't. Later that morning, when she steps onto the dais in the audience chamber, the crowd visibly gasps. Not because they're frightened, although that's part of it, but because she looks mythic, pale as the moon, eyes lined with shadow, lips like crimson seals. Every inch of her face whispers control, power, perfection. No one dares question what lies beneath. Afterward, she retires to her chamber and allows you to remove the makeup layer by layer. You use warmed rosewater and cloths as soft as feathers. The lead paste peels away in sheets, revealing skin red and raw beneath. She winces. You apply a balm of honey and chamomile. I used to hate mirrors, she confides. Now I hate remembering what they once showed. You nod and pretend not to hear the wobble in her voice. She closes her eyes. You dab a final touch of almond oil along her jaw and whisper, "Still beautiful. Your Majesty." She doesn't open her eyes, but her breathing slows. She believes you, or chooses to. That night, alone, in your own little nook of the palace, you stare at your reflection in a dented piece of polished tin. Your face is blotchy, tired, unpainted. You rub some leftover balm onto your cheeks and laugh. It smells like royalty. Section 15. It starts with a tooth. Or rather, the absence of one. You're called in not for makeup or bed linens this time, but for something more delicate, rebuilding the Queen's smile. Because today, she's lost another molar. And when Elizabeth loses a tooth, everyone else loses their appetite. When you arrive, the room smells of clove oil and burnt orange peel, the Tudor equivalent of a dental clinic. The Queen is reclined, head tilted back, lips slightly parted. A physician stands nearby, nervously holding a linen soaked with blood. One of her ladies is fanning her, though she looks more likely to faint than the Queen does. You've seen her face bruised, powdered, cracked, but never like this. The missing tooth leaves a small gap in her famously precise expression. It throws everything off the set of her jaw. The arch of her smile, the way her lips press into disdain. You're handed a box of false tooth components, ivory, bone, and, disturbingly, what appears to be a sheep's tooth shaved to human shape. You choose the ivory. She deserves the best. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth wore full dentures by the end of her life or merely had strategic tooth replacements. What's clear is that her dental health was dire. Decades of sugar, imported as a royal luxury from the New World, combined with lead-based cosmetics and sheer stress, took their toll. You begin fitting the false tooth with beeswax paste. Your hands steady, despite the absurdity of it all. The ivory piece clicks softly into place. She bites down once, winces. It feels foreign. She mutters, "It's meant to." You say softly, smoothing her lip, "Later." You're summoned again this time to prepare her for a portrait sitting. Not a casual sketch, but one of those full-blown, painted for eternity affairs. That means reconstructing symmetry. You blend extra cerusse over her jawline. Add a shadow under her cheek, to restore balance, and subtly adjust her lip line with red ochre until it appears even, and still, something's off. She notices, too. Do I look old? You freeze. Say nothing. I do. She answers herself. It's the mouth. It gives everything away. You apply a dab of rose-tinted balm to distract from the shape. She holds still, stares into the mirror like she's studying an enemy. The painter arrives. He bows deeply and avoids direct eye contact, which is both protocol and self-preservation. He sets up his easel, brushes, and canvas. You step back, now relegated to the edge of the room. Watching as he begins, she holds her pose perfectly chin raised, eyes unreadable, but her hand clenches the armrest beneath the gown. You recognize the sign. She's in pain. You quickly brew a clove and poppy seed infusion, not strong enough to dull her mind, but enough to take the edge off the throb in her jaw. She sips it slowly through a pipe straw. Never breaking pose, the hours pass. Her shoulders stiffen. Her eyelids twitch. You see it all. And yet, she doesn't flinch. She commands the room with a face that no longer entirely belongs to her, and yet is entirely hers. Later, when the painter leaves, the spell breaks. She exhales, slouches slightly. The false tooth, now glued firm, seems to have settled, but her mouth is dry from clenching. You offer her water with a sprig of mint. She drinks. Burn that portrait if he got the mouth wrong, she says, then pauses. Actually, have it sent to France. You smile. You admire her in these moments, not just for the wit, but for the stamina. You've seen courtiers crumble from a bad shoelace. She endures a rotting jaw, with royal poise. That night, in the servants' quarters, rumors spread like wildfire. The queen has no teeth left. One says, she's having a gold mouth made. Says another, she eats soup through her nose. Whispers a third, you say nothing. Let them chatter, because you were the one who touched her face. Who filled the space where something once lived? Who saw the woman beneath the mask blink against pain and keep blinking until it passed? And when you finally crawl into bed, you dream of teeth, of rows of them lining her chamber floor like pearls spilled from a snapped necklace. You gather them in your apron. You try to find the right one to give her back her voice. You never do. You're woken before dawn by the clatter of pearls hitting stone. The queen's necklace, one of her favorites, the long looping strand she's worn since the Armada years, has snapped. Half the court is already on their hands and knees under candlelight, scouring the rush-covered floor for missing orbs like rats chasing treasure. You're handed a tray and told to make yourself useful. It's going to be one of those days. You crouch beside a tapestry-covered bench, fingers sifting through dust. Hairpins. What might be a dried plum. And aha, 2 pearls, still warm from the queen's neck. You drop them into a silk pouch and return to your post. Just as the queen enters, barefoot, wrapped in a wool robe, her hair braided but unadorned. She looks half royal, half ghost. What time is it, she asks, half past fog and dread. Your Majesty, someone mutters too softly to be identified. She smirks anyway. Today's disaster isn't just the pearls. There's also the wig, or rather, the absence of one. The queen's favorite auburn wig, the one curled in ringlets and dusted with crushed pearls, has gone missing. Vanished. Stolen. or maybe just misplaced in the chaos of a midnight wardrobe change. Either way, she's furious. You're dispatched to the wig chamber to find something acceptable. A vague word that could mean anything from majestic to marginally tolerable. The shelves are lined with heads. Not real ones, you hope, but carved wooden forms topped with every imaginable hairstyle, coiled buns, dramatic waves, towering shapes meant to suggest moral superiority. You examine one in particular, stiff curls the color of rust, still smelling faintly of lavender and sweat. This one might do. You carry it back, arms trembling. The queen inspects it with a scowl. It looks like it died in battle. You hold your breath, but we'll make it work. You help her don it, adjusting the ribbons beneath her chin. Her real hair, now thinning and patched from years of tightly wound styles and chemical powders, disappears beneath the elaborate false crown. You secure the final curl with a pearl-tipped pin, one you recovered earlier. She notices. Good, she says. It remembers where it belongs. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's obsession with wigs was about vanity or necessity. What's certain is that she possessed over 80 of them, each styled to project dominance, youth, and timeless power. They weren't just fashion, they were armor. And beneath that armor was a woman who knew exactly how the world measured her worth. The rest of the day is spent preparing for a court mask. It's not just a party, it's theater, politics, and surveillance, all stitched into one shimmering evening. You're assigned a wardrobe detail and spend most of your hours stitching silver thread into a velvet cape the queen may or may not wear, depending on whether it feels lucky. The mask begins at twilight. Torches flicker. Musicians tune their lutes and viols. Guests arrive costumed as Greek gods, Roman emperors, and personified virtues. Like chastity, she's wearing a steel corset, and justice blindfolded and tripping over her own scales. The queen enters last, a vision of moonlight, silver gown, sapphire bodice, and the recovered auburn wig crowned with a circlet of tiny stars. She doesn't walk so much as glide. Every eye turns toward her not because they're forced to, but because they want to. She is spectacle incarnate. You stand at the edge, watching. The orchestra begins. The mask unfolds allegorical scenes, whispered metaphors, veiled insults at Spain, flirtations that are both courtship and test. The queen does not laugh, but she smiles once, and everyone notices. Later, in her chambers, the wig comes off. You help unpin it, careful not to tug. Beneath it, her scalp is pink and tender. You apply balm with your fingertips, cool, herbal, soothing. She sighs. Do you ever wish you were invisible? She asks. You pose. All the time. You reply. She nods. I used to. Now I just wish I could choose when to be seen. You finish massaging her temples and lift the balm away. The queen sits with her eyes closed. Hair down. No pearls. No paint. Just a woman in wool, curled in a chair too large for her bones. That night, before sleep, you stare at the stars through a crack in the shutters and imagine what it must feel like to be the sun worshipped, constant, and utterly alone. And then you dream of wigs with eyes, of powdered curls whispering state secrets, of pearls crawling across the floor, searching for their mistress. You don't question it. You're too tired. You start your day ankle-deep in foot baths. Warm water, sloshing in shallow copper basins. steam rising in lazy curls, and an aroma that can only be described as a desperate herbal apology. You're elbow deep in sage, marjoram, thyme, and a dash of vinegar. Today's royal soak recipe. Why? Because the queen's feet are aching, and her patience is thin. The royal shoes gorgeously embroidered, ridiculously narrow, and likely designed by someone who hated women, have done their damage. You carry the footbaths into her chamber with the solemn reverence of someone transporting relics. She sits with one slipper dangling dramatically, giving you a look that says, "You may approach, but do it better than yesterday." You kneel. She places one pale foot into the bath, and a sigh escapes her lips. Not quite pleasure, not quite pain. You begin the usual ritual, gently scrubbing her heels with linen, massaging her arches with rosemary oil, then patting dry with fabric softer than anything you've ever worn. You try not to dwell on that. Her toenails are cracked. The skin between her toes is raw from days without airing. You don't wince. She does. Barely. You apply a lavender salve and wrap her feet in clean silk strips to prevent further chafing. "Do you think my feet are ugly?" she asks. Eyes closed. You hesitate. They have carried England. Your Majesty. She chuckles. Flattery from a foot servant. I must be loved. But this isn't just about pampering. Today, she's preparing for a progress, a royal journey through the countryside that requires days of travel, pageantry, and pretending the air doesn't smell like pig dung, which means hours in carriages bouncing over cobblestone and dirt roads. Royal feet shoved into velvet torture devices. Historians still argue whether these progresses were for political strategy or simply royal boredom. Some believe Elizabeth used them to solidify loyalty among the nobles, while others suspect she enjoyed showing off her face to the common folk like a living icon. Either way, the queen moves, and so must her entourage. You're assigned to travel hygiene detail. It's as glamorous as it sounds. First, the chamber pot. Portable and floral painted. It travels under her carriage seat, discreetly emptied by someone luckier than you. Next, the mobile washstand, a folding table fitted with a silver bowl, rosewater jug, and a mirror too warped to be useful. You polish it anyway. Then there's the linen situation. For travel, she wears multiple shifts. Undergarments change daily, sometimes twice, due to sweating, dust, or unexpected nausea. The outer layers might be resplendent, but underneath she's wrapped in practicality, washable, scentable, and sacrificial. You prep each linen with sachets of crushed bay leaf and cloves, then tuck in thin sprigs of rue to ward off road spirits. Don't laugh. It's working so far. During the progress, the queen is untouchable. In villages, peasants bow so low they resemble grazing sheep. Children throw flower petals that immediately stick to carriage wheels and turn to mush. The queen smiles, waves, occasionally delivers a speech about virtue and obedience, all while seated in a jostling, painted box pulled by 6 exhausted horses. Behind her, you bounce along in a cart stuffed with laundry, herbs, and 2 chambermaids who won't stop debating whether or not the queen has false armpit hair. You try not to join in, but honestly, it's a fair question. The real challenge, though, is nighttime. You stop at manor houses along the route, some grand, some drafty, most crawling with curious lords, hoping to impress before the queen can enter. You race ahead to prepare her sleeping quarters. That means boiling water, scalding koms, scenting the sheets, and lighting candles in all four corners to confuse bad humors. You also check the mattress for rodents. That's not symbolic. That's just protocol. One night, in Norfolk, things go wrong. The chamber smells musty. The linens are damp, and someone left a dead weasel in the hearth. You do your best, burn rosemary, crush dried lemon into the pillows, and open every window. But the queen enters, sniffs once, and declares, "This bed was made by my enemies." You don't argue. She refuses to sleep in it. Instead, she stays up by the fire, barefoot, wrapped in a travel cloak, and sipping a cordial made from fermented quince and regret. You kneel beside her, wiping her feet with warm cloths, massaging the ache from her calves. She says nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, even queens grow tired of thrones. You nod. Not that she's really expecting an answer. You sleep sitting upright that night, propped against the laundry cart, lulled by the sound of distant snores and horses shifting in their stalls. You dream of feet, endless feet, marching through meadows, over frost, into fire. When you wake, your fingers still smell like vinegar and thyme, and the queen, she's already dressed. There's frost on the window panes this morning. Not the delicate kind that paints leaves and swirls like lace, but thick, crusty frost that makes your breath hang in the air, like a ghost of last night's bad decisions. You wake with your back against the laundry cart again, and fingers curled around a half-empty rosewater bottle for warmth. The queen is already upright, seated by a tiny fire that couldn't roast a walnut. Her breath clouds as she reads. Bare fingers, flipping pages with the grace of someone who's ignored cold their whole life. She notices you shivering and says, "Don't let it settle in your lungs. It's terribly inconvenient." You smile. Of course. You're my este. I'll make sure the air knows. Today's challenge: a cold weather emergency protocol. Her skin has dried like parchment. The crack beneath her ear has reopened. And the cold is doing unspeakable things to her hands, once called lily-like. Now, more like winter root vegetables. You prepare a heated compress of goat milk and rosehip oil, and apply it to her temples with careful circles. She sighs. It's unclear whether from comfort or existential fatigue. Then comes the real horror hair-washing day. Elizabeth, famously meticulous, avoided full-body bathing as it was seen as weakening the humors. But hair must be washed when absolutely necessary. And unfortunately for you, today is necessary. The scent of old powder, animal fat, and lingering sweet wine has become a little too royal. You set up in a side chamber. Stone floor covered in thick cloths. 2 heated buckets of water, one for rinsing and one for regret. Sit at the ready. You mix a cleansing paste of vinegar, eggs, and Leona smells like salad dressing. Works like magic. She sits, grim-faced, like someone bracing for a sword fight. The moment the warm water touches her scalp, she flinches. You freeze. Continue. She mutters. You lather gently, watching the white of the paste turn a strange gray as it meets weeks of powder, oil, and soot. You rinse. Comb. Rinse again. By the end, her curls are limp but clean. You towel dry with a cloth embroidered with Tudor roses. Then, Work in a beeswax balm to lock in the scent and disguise the trauma. I feel strangely mortal, she says, glancing at a strand of loose hair on her gown. You smell better than a bishop in spring. You reply. She snorts an unladylike but real sound. You treasure it. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's strict bathing habits were superstition or medical wisdom. Some point to her long life. As evidence, the minimal washing theory worked. Others argue she simply got lucky, or kept enough people scrubbing everything around her that the effect was the same. What no one disputes, she smelled less like roses and more like power. After the ordeal, you help reapply her signature scent, ambergris and civet, layered with rose oil. The result: a perfume that somehow smells like silk diplomacy and ancient library books. A scent you now associate with both nightmares and national pride. The afternoon is taken up with audiences. Nobles shuffle in with petitions and offerings, rare gloves, peacock feathers, tiny jeweled spoons. One brings candied violets. She accepts them with a nod, then hands them directly to you. Taste them, she says. You do. They taste like regret and flower pot. Later, back in her private chamber, she removes her rings. It takes time. Her fingers have swollen slightly from the cold, and the gold clings stubbornly. One ring, an heirloom from her mother, is especially tight. She grimaces as you ease it off with oil. Does England ever feel like this to you, she asks. Beautiful, but choking, you pose. Only when it forgets how strong its hands are. She looks up sharply. For a moment, you think you've said too much, but then she smiles. That night, snow begins to fall. You open the shutters, just enough to watch it drift past the torchlight. Inside the chamber, the queen sits by the hearth, bareheaded, her hair loose and drying. Her skin shines faintly in the firelight, powderless, flawed, human. She looks, just for a heartbeat, like someone you might meet at the end of the world, seated on a log, deciding what comes next. She notices your gaze and says, "When I'm gone, they'll paint me flawless." You nod. They'll forget you ever caught cold. She laughs. Good. Let them choke on their own illusions. You close the shutters. Tonight, the queen can't sleep. Which means, you guessed it, you can't sleep either. The castle is still and dark, save for the muted tap of her slippered foot on the rushes and the occasional grumble of a fire reluctant to burn. She paces in her chamber like a lioness in a laced-up gown. Hair down, skin pale, eyes rimmed with fatigue, but far too sharp to be restful. You're seated near the fire, polishing a comb that she may or may not request, when she suddenly stops pacing and asks, "Do you think I'm ugly?" It's not a joke, and not a trap, just a quiet, strange question tossed into the night like a stone into a pond. You look up slowly. "I think you're terrifying." She smiles. "That'll do." She settles into the chair by the hearth, and you kneel to gently brush her hair. It's thin now, wispy, breakable, stubborn in all the wrong places. You start at the ends and work your way up, careful not to tug. Her scalp is still tender from yesterday's vinegar cleanse. People forget the weight of beauty. She murmurs. They think it floats, but it drags behind you like a chain. You hum in agreement. Then, un moment là-dessus, offer. But you wear it well, even in chainmail. She snorts again, that low, Unguarded laugh she only uses when the court is asleep and the candles burn low. Tonight, she wants stories, not political updates, not ambassadorial flattery. Real stories. You tell her one about a laundress who fell into a washtub during a frost and came out cleaner than she'd ever been in her life. She tells you one about a parrot she once saw that spoke Latin better than the Bishop of Ely. You pretend to be surprised, and she pretends to believe you. Outside, the snow thickens, the fire crackles, a log splits with a sharp pop, and she jumps slightly, then glares at the hearth like it personally offended her. Remind me to ban pinewood. It has no sense of timing. You brush her hair until it shines with what little oil remains in the roots. Then you apply a final rosewater mist and braid the strands loosely so they don't tangle as she sleeps. If she sleeps, because now she's talking about death, not hers. Exactly. But the idea of it, they'll put me in white, she says, and lie about how long it took to make me ready. You pose. They'll probably forget the bloodletting and focus on the lace. Good, she replies. Let them dream. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly feared death or simply loathed losing control. Some believe she accepted mortality with the same theatrical flair she brought to everything else. Others claim she clung to her image until her final breath, refusing to allow courtiers to see her decay. What remains certain, she choreographed her death, just as she did her life deliberately. Eventually, the queen falls into a half-doze, chin resting against the cushioned back of her chair, breath shallow but steady. You place a warm cloth over her hands and drape a velvet shawl across her shoulders. It smells of old lavender and the kind of loneliness only monarchs carry. You clean the room by candlelight. Gathering pins, hair, and forgotten sachets of dried lemon peel. At the hearth, you place a fresh log oak, not pine, and coax the flames quietly higher. When she shifts in her sleep, you still, then resume only when her breath evens out again. The clock strikes midnight. Somewhere in the palace. Edo. Box. Somewhere else. A guard stifles a sneeze. But here, in this gilded room of silks and secrets, the Virgin Queen snores softly, and you watch her age one breath at a time. When she stirs, hours later, the first thing she says is, "Fetch the white ruff with the tiny bees. I want to wear something honest today." You blink. Honest. They sting, she says. Like me. You find the ruff. It does. In fact, have tiny embroidered bees. You wonder who stitched them, how long ago, and whether they knew that centuries later, historians would study this very piece and write essays arguing about whether the bees were symbolic of her sting or merely fashionable insects. You help her dress. Powder, gown, wig, gloves, ring, perfume. The mask returns. But as she walks out, into a day filled with advisors, letters, and diplomacy stitched in silk, she turns to you briefly and says, "Tonight, we'll do the stories again." And just like that, you know you'll stay. Because beneath the ambergris and powder, beneath the gowns and crowns and bad wigs, you've seen her. Not just the monarch. The person. The woman who asked if she was ugly. The one who admitted she was tired. The one who, in the middle of winter, asked for honesty stitched into a ruff. You blow out the candle. The frost lingers for days. painting the palace windows in stubborn veins of white, curling under doors. No matter how many wool tapestries you pile against the cracks, your breath clouds the mirror as you press your palm to the glass, trying to gauge whether spring will ever return, or if this palace has simply been swallowed whole by the cold. Inside, life carries on as usual, powdered, perfumed, and barely thawed. Today, Elizabeth rises late, not out of laziness. She's already read dispatches and dictated a biting letter to a Spanish envoy before most of the court stirred, but because she's allowing her skin time to breathe. That's what she calls it. In truth, her hands are trembling again when she lifts the mirror. You can see it. Even if she won't name it, she's refused full paint today. No white lead. No carmine blush. No soot to rim the eyes. Just a thin glaze of egg white to tighten the skin, and a whisper of crushed pearls across her eyelids to remind them, "I'm still rare," she says. As you dress her, layer by layer, you notice the quiet. No loot in the hallway. No whispers from the door. No rustle of gossip hidden in compliments. The Queen requested silence today, and the palace obeys, as if England itself is tiptoeing. You button her gown black velvet, embroidered with silver thread that catches the firelight and makes her look like night itself. Come to pass, judgment. The final touch, a jeweled crucifix, hung low, resting against a bodice lined in linen that will be yellowed with sweat by nightfall. She glances at the mirror, not at herself, at you. "Well," she asks, "do I still look terrifying?" You nod, majestically so. She allows a smile, then turns away before it can grow. Good. I wouldn't want anyone getting too comfortable. The day is filled with meetings. A bishop collapses during one from heat and anxiety. A noblewoman's gown catches fire near a candle. The Queen doesn't flinch at either. You, however, start keeping a water jug nearby, just in case. That evening, she dismisses everyone but you. She sits at her dressing table, sighs, and begins the ritual of undoing. The pins come first. Dozens of them, each delicately pulled from her wig. Each one warming slightly in your hand before joining the pile. Then the wig itself, sweat-damp and itchy, lifted free like a helmet. Her real hair, thin and patchy, lies flat against her scalp. You don't stare. Next, the gloves, revealing hands that are pale, lined, and quietly trembling. Then the earrings, which leave her lobes red and sore. Then the bodice, which you unlace slowly, giving her time to exhale. With every layer peeled away, she becomes less the Queen and more someone else. Not lesser, just different. You unfasten the ruff, the one with the bees. She watches you carefully. They'll say, "I was untouchable," she murmurs. You nod. And you were, but also messy, she says, half a smile returning. Sticky, stinking, painted, powdered, health teams. Completely human. You offer. She leans back, tilts her head toward the ceiling, and closes her eyes. Let them write what they will, as long as they write. You warm a cloth near the fire, fold it twice, and gently wipe away the last of the egg white. Her bare face stares back at you, unpainted, unguarded, and utterly exhausted. The lines around her mouth seem deeper tonight, the softness beneath her chin more pronounced. She's still beautiful, but not because she's pretending not to age, because she doesn't flinch. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth died a virgin, whether she regretted not marrying, whether her image was armor or illusion. But as you watch her sit in silence, rubbing her thumb over a cracked ring, you realize those questions miss the point. She didn't live to be decoded. She lived to endure. As you prepare her bed, airing the linen with lavender and warming stones to slip beneath the sheets, she stands barefoot by the hearth. She speaks without turning. Will they remember the way I smelled? You pose. Only the poets. That earns a real laugh. Quiet. Tired. True. She climbs into bed. Not gracefully. Not like in the portraits. She grunts a little and mutters something about the mattress being as cold as Spanish diplomacy. You tuck the blankets around her and pull the curtain halfway closed. Stay, she says softly. So you do. You sit in the chair beside her bed, listening to the soft crackle of fire, the rhythmic breath of the Queen, and the muffled silence of a palace holding its breath. You think of the powders, the salves, the wigs and wines, the odors hidden and the truths exposed, and you realize, despite the rot, the sweat, the laughably bad hygiene, by modern standards, there's something magnificent in how she carried it all. Not pretending to be pure, just untouchable. She shifts once, murmurs something you can't catch, and settles again. You watch her sleep. This woman built of myth and makeup, to vinegar and willpower. A sovereign who ruled not in spite of her flaws, but because of them. You close your eyes, and for the first time in days, you don't dream of foot baths or toothpicks or rouge pots. You dream of a single white ruff, gently embroidered with bees, floating in a stream, carried off into the dark. ChatGPT, Darnoy. As the last embers in the royal hearth begin to fade, so too does the weight of the day. You lean back in your chair, spine softened by fatigue, eyelids heavy as centuries. The candlelight flickers slower now, casting long, sleepy shadows against the stone walls where so many secrets have echoed. In the next room, Elizabeth breathes steadily beneath a mound of velvet and linen, wrapped not in glory or grandeur, but in something far older exhaustion. Perhaps, or peace. The palace has quieted fully. No servants scurry. No dogs bark. Even the wind outside seems to hush itself as it brushes gently against the shutters. You imagine the scent of rosewater still clinging faintly to your sleeves, the ghost of a royal perfume lingering in the folds of a gown long removed. All around you is warmth, the slow hum of silence, and the softness that comes only when everything that needed to be said has already passed. You picture the ruff with its tiny bees tucked away in some drawer, waiting for another day or none at all. And it's oddly comforting, knowing that history remembers the performances, but you saw the intermissions. You saw the rawness beneath the rule, the smudge beneath the crown, the woman behind the myth. So take a deep breath now. Let it out slowly. Let the courtly chaos drift into memory. The powder and vinegar dissolve into air. Sink into the quiet. Into the fire-warmed dark. Into the soft, nothing that waits beyond the noise. The Queen is asleep. England rests. And so should you. Sweet dreams.